So Mr. Woodard left off by talking about Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve, another curve that we want to flatten. While the pandemic's curve goes up, the Ebbinghaus curve goes down, and it goes down like that. So if you don't continue to repeat information that you've learned, you haven't really learned it. You'll forget it really quick. You got to keep repeating it. Got to keep rehearsing it. Got to keep doing those mnemonic devices to keep it in your brains and get it securely into that long-term memory. All right, some other of those sins, those flaws in our memories. We've all had this happen to us, absent-mindedness. Where did I put my keys? This happened to me the other day. I think it was with my mask. I had my mask in my hand, but I had no idea that I had my mask in my hand. And I had other stuff in my hands as well. And I'm looking all over for my mask. Where did I put my mask? Where did I put my mask? And it took me like 45 seconds before I realized, oh, it's right here in my hand. We've all had that happen to us. Absent-mindedness is the official term, even though it doesn't sound all that official. Misattribution. This is one that I talk about with my English classes quite a bit. So oftentimes we'll think that we got information from one place, but we actually got it from another place. So we'll think one person told us that information, but it was actually somebody else. Or, and this is why I talk about it in the English class, oftentimes we'll think we came up with an idea, but we actually read it someplace else some time ago. And so I talk about this in the English realm because you have to be careful when you're doing like a research paper or something. You'll be reading different sources and gathering information. And if you're not carefully taking notes on the information that you're gathering, you might come up with something that you think you've thought of on your own and you actually read about somewhere else. So you've misattributed where that information came from. And that can cause obvious problems in the academic world as in other parts of our lives as well. All right. Suggestibility. This is one of my favorite videos that we show. Obviously, we're not going to show it here. It's only a couple minute clip from 60 minutes. And this is when you can actually suggest an idea and their memories will cling on to that idea and actually remember something that could never have happened. So the 60 minutes clip is, there's a famous psychologist. Her name is Elizabeth Loftus. You'll see her name in some upcoming slides here. And she got groups of people, or she talked to a group of people individually, and she said, hey, do you remember when you went to Disneyland and you saw Bugs Bunny? And can you tell us a little bit about that experience? And a phenomenal number of people said, oh yeah, I loved Bugs Bunny at Disneyland and could tell what Bugs Bunny was wearing, and Bugs Bunny was so tall and I was this little kid, and I remember he was eating carrot, and all these details they remember very clearly about Disneyland and Bugs Bunny. Problem is, Bugs Bunny is a Warner Brothers character. Bugs Bunny would never be at Disneyland. And yet, just merely suggesting, hey, do you remember when you saw Bugs Bunny there? Memories came flooding back that couldn't have possibly happened. Mr. Woodard talked a little bit about, actually, I'll get to that one here in a second. So that misinformation effect, we're exposed to misleading information, and we might completely misremember an event simply because we've been kind of steered into another direction. Problem with that is it doesn't take much to steer somebody in another direction. So I'm going to get to more about eyewitness and how easy it is to steer somebody from memory based on a single word here in just a second. We're kind of getting into some legal arenas here, and Elizabeth Loftus actually has been a forerunner in eyewitness accounts and making sure that eyewitness accounts are discredited when they need to be discredited because memories have played tricks on the eyewitness. Now, if a police officer is interrogating somebody simply by saying, be careful with how you're framing your memories. Really think through the situation because there is this thing called memory bias. We want to be careful how we ask our questions. Make sure that you're careful in your response. Take your time. Think about what you remember. Okay? Passage of time can lead to an increase in misremembering information, obviously. Mr. Woodard, that's where I wanted to bring up Mr. Woodard. He talked about with the 9/11 account, 5 years down the road versus the next day. September 12th, 2001 versus memories 5 or 10 years later. Well, those memories 5 or 10 years later are going to be they're going to be off more than that one that's a day later. And part of the problem with that is, as Mr. Woodard mentioned, people will hold hard and fast. I totally remember what happened on 9/11. 10 years later, and then the professor showed them what they wrote the day after, and they said, oh no, that's wrong. That doesn't mean that their new memory is right just because they have a lot of confidence in that memory. Okay, so again, goes back to that first thing on this slide, that just knowing that there are memory bias, that can help with our memories and our recollections, because we're more apt to be more objective about our memories. Okay. Now, when it was talking about leading questions in that note on that slide, Elizabeth Loftus did a car crash study, and there's a video of a car crash. And then what she did was she asked groups of people what they saw in that car crash. And what she did, she asked them to estimate how fast do you think the car was going when it crashed into the other car. The problem is, the experiment was, she just changed one word. She said, how fast do you think that car was going when it smashed into the other car? How fast do you think the car was going when it collided with the other car? Obviously, she's not asking the same people all these different terms. But in the group where she asked smashed, you can see there was an average of 40.8 miles per hour is what they estimated the car was traveling when it got into the accident. By changing that to how fast do you think the car was going when it contacted the other car, 31.8. You got a 9-mile-an-hour drop simply by changing one word. That's why it's very important for investigators to be very careful with how they frame certain questions. And you can see there that the actual speed was somewhere in the middle, about 36 miles an hour. So how you ask a question can produce suggestibility and reframe a memory. All right, bias is another one of those sins of memory, one of those flaws of memory. And this is when an attitude or an emotion can distort a memory. The famous one that we talk about in the psych world is confirmation bias. So this tendency to look for information, to remember information that kind of goes with what we want to confirm in our own beliefs. Easy example in today's world is just the news media. CNN versus Fox News. It's the easy example. More people will watch. If you're liberal, you'll watch CNN. If you're conservative, you'll watch Fox, and you'll have a tendency to remember the information that those sources are giving you. Okay? Right, wrong, indifferent. That's just something that's been in the news, obviously, of late. Self-consistency bias. We want to think of ourselves as being consistent over a period of time. So we might remember ourselves as being patient 15 years ago because we're patient right now. The problem was maybe 15 years ago we weren't that patient. But we have that implicit bias of self-consistency. We want to be consistent across time. Okay, I'm talked for 8.5 minutes. I'll let Mr. Woodard take it from here with other biases. I hope, Mr. Woodard, I've left you with fun stuff that you like to talk about.